Good morning. I'd like to bring this April 23rd, 2020 meeting of the House K-12 Education Finance Committee to order. Welcome, everyone. A reminder for members in the public that remote hearings are possible thanks to a newly passed Rule 10.01. This rule has been posted online and is linked to in our public meeting notice on the House website. All remote hearings will be recorded and live streamed by House Public Information Services. Members have the contents of their virtual packets available to them, and for the public, the materials have been posted online on the committee webpage. Members, if you're looking for all the items in one place, they are attached in the calendar invite you received from Ms. Burt. To get on the list to be recognized by the chair, members using the Zoom interface have the ability to raise their hand via the app. Ms. Burt will place your name on the list to be recognized. If a member is on their phone and doesn't have access to the raise your hand feature, please email Ms. Burt and she will put your question in the queue. This is the digital equivalent of getting the attention of the chair or the CA during a committee hearing. An email from your House account with the subject line, "Please recognize," is all that is required if you're on the phone. The CLA will now call the oral roll call of members. We'll be unmuting members now. Please minimize any background noise. Ms. Sunderland?
Representative Davney.
Present.
Representative Sandstead.
Present.
Representative Krisha.
Krisha, present.
Representative Bennett.
Present.
Representative Daniels. Representative Daniels.
Present.
Representative DeMith.
Present.
Representative Detmer.
Detmer, present.
Representative Edelson.
Present.
Representative Erickson.
Present.
Representative Hewitt.
Present.
Representative Jurgens.
Present.
Representative Katiza Watoon.
Here.
Representative Kanesh Padin.
Present.
Representative Marquardt.
Present.
Representative Murphy.
Present.
Representative Nornis.
Present.
Representative Pryor.
Present.
Representative Richardson.
Present.
Representative Sandell.
Present.
Representative Youakim. Representative Youakim. That is the roll. Quorum is present.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sunderland. We'll now mute all members again. Members, the items in your folders are as follows: the meeting agenda, a copy of both bills that we will be hearing today, a House research summary of each bill, supporting documents for House File 116, which include 2 letters, a spreadsheet from Mr. Strom, and the current fiscal note. These items are also posted on the committee webpage in an OCR compatible format. Are there any committee member questions? Hearing none. Representative Krisha, thank you for raising the issue of committee minutes at our last hearing. Have you had the opportunity to review the minutes from the March 10th meeting?
I have. I'll move the minutes.
Representative Krisha moves acceptance of the March 10 minutes. Members, other committees have had the practice of approving minutes on simply an oral vote, not requiring a roll call. If there's no objection, I would like to adopt that practice as well to keep the committee moving forward. With that, on the Krisha motion to adopt the March 10 minutes, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion prevails. Thank you for that, members. Representative Sandstein. Excuse me?
I can hear you now. I lost some sound there.
Okay. Have you had a chance to look at the April 7th minutes, Representative?
I have, and I would like to move the minutes from the virtual meeting of April 7th.
Thank you very much. Any discussion to this Anstead motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion prevails. And Representative Anstead, I understand you spent a little time with the April 21 minutes as well.
I did, and that was our virtual meeting. I will move those minutes as well.
Thank you. Any discussion to this Anstead motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion prevails. Thank you very much, members. We're getting our we're getting used to how we do these new meetings. Members, the bills we have before us today were heard previously. On your agenda, you'll see the dates these bills were heard in this committee. House File 116 was heard on February 20th, 2019, and House File 1013 was heard on February 13th, 2019. All testimony was taken on those bills, and we have at that time, and we have no amendments before us. Today, we will simply be moving these bills onto their next committee stop. Representative Marquardt, would you like to make a motion to move House File 116 before the committee with a recommendation, that it be referred to the Committee on Ways and Means?
I will make that motion on House File 116.
Thank you, Representative Marquardt. Before we hear briefly from Representative Freiberg, would Ms. Adrians like to speak to the fiscal note that's in process for House File 116?
Would, I'm so sorry. It takes me way too long to unmute.
No worries.
Okay, Mr. Chair and members, the fiscal note shows that there is a general fund cost. It starts in fiscal year 21, and it is $50,000 in the first year, $95,000 in the second year, and $130,000 in the third year. And I just want to point out that this is the general fund cost, and the assumptions that the district made is that there would be about an average of $440,000 in revenue each year based on this 5-year average that they compiled. And there would, in addition to that relatively low general fund cost, there would be a levy cost as well. And if you happen to be looking at the fiscal note, all of this information is in a table on the last page of the fiscal note. And so the levy cost is a bit higher. So it starts in the first year, it's about $385,000, and then it goes up to $783,000 in 22, and up to just under $1.2 million in 23. So I just want to point out to everybody that there is a smaller general fund cost, but then there is a levy cost as well, based on the assumptions that the department came up with.
Thank you, Ms. Adrians. Any questions from committee members on the fiscal note at this time? Seeing none. Representative Youakim, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Representative Freiberg, would you like to introduce House File 116?
Sure. Thank you, Chair Davney. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss this bill. So the committee heard and discussed it previously, so I'll keep my explanation of the bill short. I'm happy to discuss it for as long as members and the chair wishes, but House File 116 would allow school districts the ability to renew existing operating referendums by a vote of the school board, but only at the same level and for the same duration as the initial referendum. This bill is supported by the major education groups. We heard testimony last year that these operating referendum renewals create significant expense for school districts and are almost always passed. And actually, I noticed in the fiscal note before you, it states that over the last 4 years, all 56 renewal elections for expiring referendums were successful. I feel this bill is particularly important now. Many school districts are facing serious budgetary problems related to the current pandemic, and it does not make sense to require them to further strain their finances by holding unnecessary elections. I hope the committee will once again support House File 116.
Thank you very much, Representative Freiberg. Any questions from the committee for Representative Freiberg? Representative Sandell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I read the letter from the business partnership suggesting that the extension of the referendum would really abrogate conversation and discussion among citizens. Of course, that's an important issue. The bill that Representative Freiberg presents suggested that there will be conversation with the board and with citizens as well. But what if citizens are generally opposed to the continuing the referendum, or don't have confidence in the way that the money was spent? Is there do you expect the board to respect that opposition and perhaps go back and ask for a vote again? Thank you.
Representative Freiberg.
Well, I mean, it's kind of hard to speculate about how individual boards might respond to that. I will note that the bill requires the school board to adopt a written resolution authorizing the renewal after holding a meeting and allowing public testimony on the proposed renewal. That's on line 1.16, 1.17 of the bill. So anyone who is opposed to the renewal of the referendum would have the ability to come before the school board and voice their opposition. If it turns out that the board is making a decision that is, there's always going to be some people who are opposed, but if it turns out that the school board is making a decision that's at odds with the majority of their constituents, then I imagine they will feel electoral repercussions about their decision. That's always, ultimately, it comes back to the voters.
Sure.
Representative Sandell, any follow-up?
Thank you very much, Chair. No, that's it's just a concern, and but I think Representative Freiberg has answered positively. Thanks.
Thank you. Representative Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. And, I do have some concerns on this, and I have a question very similar to Representative Sandell's. And so but the concern I want to put out is I am very much for local control for our schools. I've made that pretty clear in the past many times. I think it's almost similar to the least restrictive environment that we give children, and it's what we want our schools to operate under. That local autonomy is important. But when I look at the funding part of it, I believe we have to be very careful in what we do. As much as I respect our school boards and the decisions that they make, the funding itself, that local autonomy, I believe, belongs in the hands of the people who are paying the money, the taxpayers, and that local autonomy is best left in their hands. It allows them to either put a rubber stamp and say, yep, we really agree with what those schools are doing, or no, we don't. Or it also gives them that local autonomy to say, you know what, we would love to do this, but we can't afford it. So my question for Representative Freiberg in this area, I heard some answers just previous that answered my questions, but is there anything in the bill that would give an out kind of for taxpayers after the fact, so the school board is supposed to post this and people can list their different thoughts on it. But after the fact, can it be recalled somehow? Is there any kind of a backdoor component in this bill that would allow for a recall if there's enough petition signatures or some such thing?
Representative Freiberg?
No, that provision is not in here. I will say, though, that the bill essentially puts school districts, which are local units of government, on the same footing as cities and counties. Cities and counties are able to pass, their levies for their operating expenses by a vote of the elected officials that aren't required to submit operating levies for a referendum every time. So again, I would just mention that the ultimate accountability measure is in the ballot box. They are elected officials, and if they make a decision that's vastly at odds with the majority of their constituents, they could get voted out as a result of it. But ultimately, the process is similar to what's followed by cities and counties.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Bennett. Representative
yeah.
Krisha.
Oh,
Oh, I'm sorry, Representative Bennett, did you have more? I
yeah,
apologize.
I did have a follow-up. I'm sorry.
Oh, please, go ahead.
And so my quick follow-up is just that I totally understand that, you know, that our cities, our local cities and so on, counties have that. But I'd still look at this as it's a lot of years that these are renewed for. And I'm struggle over this because I do believe in local control, but I believe in this case, it really belongs in the hands of the taxpayers. But thank you, Representative Freiberg, for bringing this. I know you know, you believe in local control as well, which I think is great. Appreciate the bill. I do struggle with parts of it, but thank you.
Thank you, Representative Bennett. Representative Krisha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Chair, and I won't ask any questions to the testifier. I'll just make some comments. When we originally heard this bill, times were vastly different. And I know we're going to continue to hear other bills that are going to come up in other committees and on the House floor. And we're going to talk about, no disrespect, Representative Freiberg, but when, you know, the comments we made when we first heard this bill, when we first did this, that time is gone. And the sober reality is trying to do things that 8 weeks ago would have made sense no longer will make sense. And for that reason, I can't support this bill. And I'll give a couple of examples. It's easy to say, yeah, you can just vote out school board members if you don't like that they pass this. That's a possibility. However, we're now looking at a time where, look at our meeting today. We're on Zoom. The meetings for school boards are probably going to move to the same situation. So I actually believe democracy and participation in our government is going to become vastly harder than it has ever been before. And I have been doing virtual meetings for 20 years. And I can tell you, when you run virtual organizations or virtual meetings, you actually have to over communicate, not under communicate. And what we're doing with this bill here is we're taking the conversation away that school board members need to have with their constituents. When I drive by the football field in Little Falls, I see a scoreboard. And around that scoreboard, I see 15 businesses that used to advertise there. Those advertisements could very well become tombstones for our businesses. The days of just assuming we can do this are gone. And it's a somber reality. I hate to put it that way, but we're now building a new future in a past that no longer exists. The other thing is, and I hate to put it this way, but the truth is 100% of our school districts will survive. 100% of our school districts will live. It may be leaner times, but they will survive. Not 100% of our businesses. Like I said, when I go look at the school board or the scoreboard and I see all these businesses that have donated and put money into that school, they're now looking at their epitaph. They're now looking at their last stand because they simply aren't going to survive this. I'm getting the calls. I got to believe everybody is getting these calls. And I ask myself, is this the time to start having conversations about allowing taxes to be raised and revenues to increase when we really don't know the effects of the federal dollars? We don't know how hard this is going to cut into our rural and all of our communities. And I don't know which businesses are going to survive. And Representative Freiberg, with all due respect, I can't in good conscience vote for this and then turn around to the business that put up uniforms, booster club dollars, sponsored trips and say, yeah, I took that conversation out of your hand just because I think we needed to let the school district have some certainty. I'm all for our school districts. I'm 100% behind our public education, but our businesses aren't going to survive. And I think we as a body have to look at the somber reality that we're going to have to force all of our elected officials all the way down to city councils, school boards, to have these very difficult conversations that we're having today. And they're going to have, and maybe their public will be behind them. I mean, I have faith in our constituents. There are so many people that will step up and say to school boards, yes, go ahead and pass this. But I don't want to do that without them having the conversation. And remember, we could have mail-in ballots. We could have Zoom meetings. All of the tools of democracy are going to change. And I think we have to change with it. So for that reason, Representative Freiberg, all due respect, but I can't support your bill.
Representative Freiberg, any response?
Yeah, I'd raise a couple points. I appreciate your comments, Representative Krisha, and certainly respect them. You know, just a minor point. First of all, you mentioned taxes would be raised by this bill. As I mentioned in the presentation, the bill actually doesn't authorize that. This just allows the renewal of an existing operating referendum at the same level. It doesn't allow for an increase. But kind of the broader point, I agree with you. We are in extremely different times than we've ever been before. But I would argue that that actually counsels in favor of this bill and not against it. Like business, I agree with you. Businesses are going through tremendously difficult financial times. People's personal finances are as well, and school districts are also. And so taking away their operating referendums and requiring them to spend this additional expense on elections right now when they're already facing severe financial strain, I think is going to put just extra unnecessary pressure on the education system. I'm trying right now in partnership with my spouse to manage the education of my kids who are in 1st and 4th grade from my home. And it is hard work. It's hard work juggling. You can maybe hear my kids in the background. It's hard work juggling, trying to juggle this job, my other job, and the education of my kids. And school districts need every resource that they can to go into the education of our kids. So, I mean, it's really hit home for me trying to, and I know you don't disagree with any of this, but it's just really hit home for me that right now we need to support our school districts. And I think this is a really important way we can do that.
Thank you, Representative Freiberg. Representative Jurgens.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the bill author, Representative Freiberg, in looking at the bill language, I don't see this in there. Would this be retroactive, or would it be for operating referendums going forward after enactment? Because it looks like this would be retroactive. So operating referendums that were approved by the voters 10 years ago could now be extended. Would that be accurate?
Representative Freiberg.
I'm trying to find the spot in the text of the bill. I mean, I don't know that I'd call it retroactive. I mean, the vote to reauthorize it is prospective going forward. So it relates to a referendum that's been adopted in the past, but it would allow it to continue to go forward.
I guess, Mr. Chair, my point is when voters voted to approve this operating referendum, they had no idea that it could be extended. They were voting on, say, a 10-year operating referendum, and in their minds, what they were voting to approve would end at the end of that 10-year period. And now what this bill would do was say, that vote you gave us 10 years ago, we're going to extend it another 10 years, whether you had any idea we were going to do that or not. And that's the concern that I have with it, is that, I might look at this a little bit differently if we had language in there that said, moving forward, that a referendum must include the language that says that this operating referendum at the end of the period, 10 years, could then be extended an additional 10 years by school board action. This doesn't have that. That's what I mean by retro. This takes referendums that were passed 10 years ago, 9 years ago, and then gives when the voters weren't told that there was a chance that it could be extended. They were voting on a 10-year operating referendum. Now this bill could turn it into 20 years or even 30 years. And that's a concern that I have with it. Other concerns I have already been brought up with no reverse referendum language in here. So I think that, and Representative Krisha said it best, but in a time of unprecedented economic uncertainty, I think that we have to also be concerned not only with the schools, which I think we all are, but also the voters and their uncertain economic times as well. So those are the concerns that I have with it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Jurgens. Members, we have no more questions from members at this time. We did take public testimony on this bill back last year when we heard it. We also have submissions in letter form that you've received in your virtual packets. So with that, Representative Freiberg, do you have any closing statement?
I appreciate the discussion from members. I do think this is a really important bill in the time we're facing right now that will help out school districts, parents of kids who are trying to manage the education of their kids, and teachers as well. So would appreciate members' support.
Thank you very much. With that, Representative Marquardt renews his motion to refer House File 116 to the Committee on Ways and Means. The clerk will please take the roll.
Representative Dabney.
Aye.
Representative Sandsted.
Aye.
Representative Kresha.
Grisha, no.
Representative Bennett.
No.
Representative Daniels.
No.
Representative Dameth.
No.
Representative Detmer.
Detmer, no.
Representative Edelson.
Aye.
Representative Erickson.
No.
Representative Hewitt.
Yes.
Representative Jurgens.
No.
Representative Katiza Watoon.
Aye.
Representative Kanesh Padin.
Aye.
Representative Marquardt.
Aye.
Representative Murphy.
Yes.
Representative Nornis.
No.
Representative Pryor.
Aye.
Representative Richardson.
Aye.
Representative Sandell.
Aye.
Representative Joachim.
Aye.
With 12 ayes and 8 nays, the motion prevails.
Thank you, committee members and chair. You're still muted, Chair Dabney.
Representative Murphy,
Yes.
would you like to make a motion to move House File 1013 be recommended to pass and referred to the Committee on Ways and Means?
Mr. Chair, I would like to move that House File 1031 be recommended to pass and move on to Ways and Means.
My apologies for getting the bill number incorrect.
That's all right.
Any opening comments, Representative Murphy?
Well, Mr. Chair, we heard this bill in February and last year and the year before and the year before. It's a model for communities and schools to work together for full service community schools and to enable to strengthen the community with the children as they go through school. This money would fund the site director for the schools that are granted enough money to have a director that would be the coordinator of the program with the counties and the cities and the other people in the community that serves the family of the children in full service community schools. It's a program that has worked, and I've been fortunate enough to be on at least seeing how it has grown and expanded over the years in in School District 709 Duluth. They started out with early childhood and grade school, and then they expanded the full service community school model to the junior high, and now it's in all levels of education of the children and the families of the children. And it has has exploded, and it's been very successful. And so I just want more school districts. The last time we sent grants out, or the possibility of grants out, we had many more applications than our Department of Education had many more applications for the program, to commit to the program, than there was money available. And this would establish more money for more school districts to participate on the rural level and in the metro areas as well. So it would strengthen our school districts and certainly strengthens the children's ability to learn.
Thank you very much, Representative Murphy. Are there any questions for the author? Representative Sandell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Murphy, what's the responsibility of the school district once the grant has been made, implemented, and then ends? And what's the responsibility of the Department of Education to see that the benefits of the grant might continue for the children and families of the district?
Representative Murphy.
Mr. Chair, they receive reports from the school district, and they also have to have a review when the child moves on to the next level.
Representative Sandell.
In addition to the reports, though, Representative Murphy, I'm talking about what's the commitment for the financial future of the activities of community schools in those districts.
Representative Murphy.
Total.
So once
totally, and it comes from the total budget of the school district.
Representative Sandell.
Thank you. So
maybe Mr. Strom can clarify how MDA or how MDE supervised better than I.
Mr. Chair, Representative Murphy, I'm not aware of how MDE made that decision last time around when there were grants available. I'm not sure if we've got an MDE representative on the call with us this morning or not, in terms of the process that they would use.
I hope so.
Chair Dabney?
Representative Sandell.
Well, I certainly support the idea and the activities, and I'm impressed with the support kids and their families have received, and I want to see that that's continued. My concern is that the district makes plans to assume the responsibility for continuing those services or expanding those services or making those services more efficient in the future and spreading them to perhaps other schools in the district. Representative Murphy says this is a series of examples. I think it's a great example. I just want to make sure that the schools aren't asking for more money or asking for money on a grant, and then as it becomes more difficult to provide those services, they begin to disappear and then become sort of shadows of what they were in the past, which has happened in the case of federal grants frequently in the districts that I've participated in. But I certainly support the billing, and I'm going to vote for it as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair and Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Representative Sandell. Representative Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Murphy, for bringing your bill before our committee. And I thought for sure you're going to bring a library bill, Representative Murphy. So I love you and I support our libraries. But anyway, I do have a question about your bill. I see, the fiscal appropriations, 15 million a year. And what I'm wondering, since we know that our projected surplus has pretty much gone up in a poof with the COVID-19 cloud or whatever we might say, which is very sad. Where in our state budget will this $15 million come from?
Representative Murphy?
Mr. Chair, that's more of a question that Ways and Means will be able to help with, I think. But the $15 million is not a concrete number. Before, we started out with $500,000, and we had, the last time I believe that the grants were given, we had $1 million. And the grants are for a much smaller amount to each district than $1 million or even $500,000. We need to have the amount that goes to each individual district for a particular school site. We need to cover the cost of the site coordinator. The whole concept of the full service community school is the city's or the school district's responsibility. But the incentive for the state to pay for the possible full costs of the site coordinator is very, very important. And that is the person that we need to identify and who needs to coordinate the program between the school district and the other entities that they're working with in the community, like the county and social services and nonprofits, where the full service community involvement takes place. But the grant will pay the cost of the site coordinators. And this would open up, if the more money that we can provide for it, the more school districts. And I think the last time, if I remember correctly, there were over 32 school districts that were in competition for the money for their site coordinators. And now, the last time I heard, it was a growing number of school districts across the state that want to become involved. And the site coordinator, the cost of the site coordinator is paid for by the money in this bill.
Chair?
Representative Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I really appreciate you bringing this forward, Representative Murphy. I just think as a committee and the Ways and Means Committee, obviously, like you mentioned, is going to discuss where the funds will come from. But I think right now, considering what's going on in our state and the outlook for our funding for next year is going to be rather bleak, I'm afraid. I think we have to be very careful what we're doing in spending right now, because any spending, whether it's for a really good bill we all agree with or a bill we all disagree with or we're in between, whatever that is, that money is most likely going to add to the deficit that we have next year. And so I just think we have to be very careful as we walk forward this year on any kind of spending that we do, and really limit that spending probably to more very much COVID-related things, which is not for our committee. But I just like to offer that thought as we move forward with any financial type expenditures.
Thank you, Representative Bennett. Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good to hear from you, Representative Murphy. I know how passionate you are about community schools, but I want to remind you and members that the first full-service community school was Brooklyn Center, and their superintendent, who was one of my former superintendents, had the initiative and the forethought to just do that on their own. So I know that, if a school district feels that having full-service community is so urgent that they can do this on their own, and they can find someone within staff and within budget to provide for what this bill is suggesting, and that's $15 million per year to find coordinators. So I just want to remind us of that history, and then leave us with this question. Is it a priority now to provide that? Or with, as we heard Representative Freiberg refer to, the educating of our children from a virtual setting, and the need for more broadband and for teacher development, because I know how much teachers need to understand how this process works out, as I've read what other states are doing when it comes to addressing the needs of all of our children. And then, finally, laptops or equipment that's needed. I think our focus has to be in the right place. And if we receive federal dollars that we can use in a way, I hope, Representative Dabney, that we'll consider that use and put on the back burner for now this kind of grant program, when I know full well that districts could create this on their own if this is their number one priority. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Murphy, and thank you, members.
Thank you, Representative Erickson. Representative Jurgens.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Murphy, for bringing this forward. As last year, as a member of the United Way of Hastings Board of Directors, we actually voted to fund a site coordinator at Hastings High School. And that was a partnership between the United Way of Hastings and the school district. They came up with partial funds as well. And so I understand the concept of this. I was in favor of that as the board member, and I understand the reasoning behind this, having a site coordinator to help put the students that have specific needs in front of the people that can help them. But echoing what some of my colleagues have said already, as we don't know what next school year is going to look like. We are told, or we're expecting at 2 o'clock today, that the governor is going to announce something having to do with schools for the rest of this school year. Dr. Fauci last night said that he fully expects the COVID virus to rear its ugly head again in the fall. So we don't know what it's going to look like. I question if this is the right time to move forward with this, with so much uncertainty, both with what the school year might look like, as well as funding shortfalls. So while I generally am in favor of the concept, my question is more on the timing, and is this the best use of whether it's $15 million a year or whatever it comes out to be, if this is the best use of those funds given the times. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Hewitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, thank you, Chair Murphy, for bringing this this bill. A real quick story of Chair Joachim and myself. I knew of community schools, and again, not in the space of being an educator or just a parent of kids. I never really understood this because I always I dealt with traumatic situations in the emergency setting, as when you went to their house to pick up a kid, or when you seen them in the ER, and you always wondered if there was any possibility of wraparound services. And when I seen what I seen in Rochester there, in Senator Nelson's area of that community school, and how even in this time, we're going to have services like this even more so, because we are going to go back to a recession or possibly a depression, where kids are going to need these services. And to bring in Representative Bennett and Erickson's and Jurgens' statement of, is this the time? Well, this is pretty much the time, because we're going to have to see how we're going to have to shift some of the spending and bring in private businesses. And that's what this coordinator will be probably doing. And that's what we've seen down in Rochester, where the coordinator just didn't look towards the school services, but look towards social services, look towards the United Way, like Representative Jurgens was saying, and bringing them services to these children that are needed. It really, when you have this and have these wraparound services, and I've been looking at this since Chair Joachim and I went down there, I cannot believe the difference in some of these schools. And you're right, Representative Erickson, the results of this and how it started. And I kind of like to joke that being a kid that went to a Catholic school for a few years, we kind of had wraparound services when those nuns would basically get involved with our lives a little too much and come out to our houses and tell our parents how we were doing. So this has been going on for many years, but I think what I've seen in Rochester is more needed now than ever before. And when we get the schools back open, these kids are going to need help. And even if we stay online, we already know that there's kids dropping off, and those kids are going to need wraparound services. So I think this is really a good time for this investment. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Chair Murphy, for bringing this.
Thank you, Representative Hewitt. You're reminding me that my father's experience of wraparound services when he was going to school in what's now Kitson Central was a good wrap of a ruler on his left hand when he tried to write with it. Different meaning of the word. Representative Sandsteed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would like to thank Representative Murphy for bringing this bill. Actually, a lot of what I was going to say was just said by Representative Hewitt. And without a doubt, I think we all agree that education is probably going to look a little bit different coming out of COVID. And if ever there was a time to invest, whether it's 15 million in this bill or if it at the end of the day is a different amount, I think now is the time, because the needs of our students and our families are probably going to look different if our delivery in education has to look different. And I think that supporting this bill, allowing districts to have funding to hire a coordinator is going to be helpful in identifying, is it broadband? Is it technology needs that we need for our students? Is it food? You know, what are the needs going to look like in this new era? And absolutely, we understand the need to be fiscally responsible during this time. But I think if ever there was a time to make an investment to assess the relevant and the immediate needs of our students and their families, it's probably now more than ever as we're going into something new. And we are going to need the help and the partnership of our community across the board. We need to know what resources are there, and we're going to need to be able to work together, as you know, as we've all been saying during this COVID time. We're in this together, and we're in this together in education too, and we're going to need those community services. So I don't think that this is a foolish investment given the times. I think this is well invested dollars, and I thank the chair for bringing this forward, and I thank Representative Murphy for bringing it forward.
Thank you, Representative Sandsteed. Representative Erickson, were you seeking recognition again? No? All right. Representative Katiza-Wattoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess I will echo a little bit of what Representative Sandstead and Representative Hewitt have said, just kind of with these uncharted waters of this global pandemic. And one of the things that I'm thinking of is when we're all virtually and digitally connected, and we have teachers at home trying to teach their students and potentially teaching their own children, how little time we have as individuals to try to find out, is the dentist open? Where can I go and pick up food for my children this week? All of these questions. And so I think that making the investment in having a coordinator position that our families can reach out to, that they have this information at their fingertips, or if they don't have it, they can assist in finding that information, is more critical now than ever. And I just wanted to reiterate that. So thank you, Chair Murphy, for bringing the bill. I think we really need to keep all options on the table, and I think that this could make a big difference for families all across Minnesota.
Thank you, Representative Katiza-Wattoon. Representative Joachim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, sounds like a broken record, but if this pandemic has shown us one thing, it's highlighted what our schools do for our students. When we have to stop and think about whether or not we're going to close our schools during a global pandemic because we have to make sure kids are fed and have a safe place to go, we know that schools are doing far beyond their calling already, and they need help. I want to thank Representative Murphy, Chair Murphy, for bringing this bill forward. It means so much. Our full service community schools right now are working overtime. They're trying to reach families to make sure that they have what they need for distance learning, that they have food, that their parents are engaged and have what they need to help their kids. I've heard from students all over the state. I met with the Minnesota Youth Council just to see how distance working was working for them. And you know what? It's been really hard on our students. And I think we're missing the students' voice in this. They need those services and they need that help. And it would be probably one of the best investments we could make right now to make sure that that opportunity gap isn't growing even larger with this distance learning. So thank you, Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Representative Joachim. Representative Pryor.
Thank you, Chair Dabney. Thank you, Representative Murphy, for this discussion this morning. And certainly what I could have said has already been said, and I appreciated hearing those words. What I wanted to bring to right now is talk about when we talked about full service community schools on the day that we did the education symposium, and we were talking about finally doing concrete positive action for closing these achievement gaps that we have in our schools. And one of probably one of the biggest highlights of the day was to hear about the success of these full service community schools and the work that they were doing and how they were actually achieving the goals that we had set out. And so many other places we had failed, but here is a place where we were succeeding. And now I want to say, think about those gaps and those achievement gaps that we've had in the past and how they're going to be magnified. Because this isn't just a cloud hanging over us right now. This is a flood. In this flood, we are losing lives in this flood today. And these are children right now that are in pre-K, in kindergarten, in grammar school, in middle school, and in high school, and their lives will never be the same. And I want us to think forward. If we're here 2 years from now, 4 years from now, 10 years from now, I can't imagine myself here more than 10 years from now, but that's as far as I can think. And we're looking at those kids and we're looking at those achievement scores. And then we'll look back and say, well, what choices did we make today that could have made a difference in those scores 10 years from now? And I think this choice is one that will matter. There are some investments that we must make, and we must make them now. The full service community schools, that's what they are. They are community. They're not saying St. Paul has the answer for every school district in the state. They're saying communities have the answers for every school district in the state. And these full service community schools, they are about the fullness of the service, and they will be looking for in-kind contributions. They will be looking for volunteer contributions. They will be looking for every single resource that they can pull in to those schools and to serve those students and those families. And this is a model, as Representative Hewitt said, this is a model, he's seen it work in Rochester. And he's seen it when, he has seen it when it wasn't working, when he was picking up, going on emergency runs, trying to help families and students. So, there's things that are going to matter that we're doing now. I think this is one of them. So, Representative Murphy, you are so farsighted and having introduced this bill originally. And now, more than ever, I think we need to pass it and move it on to Ways and Means. And we know the way, they have to find the means. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Pryor. Members, the Department of Education has indicated that they will get back to us at a future time to Representative Sandel's questions. They're listening in, but they didn't have the answers at their fingertips, but we'll follow up with the committee. Seeing no further questions from members, and a reminder that we did hear this bill in February and accept public comments at that time. Representative Murphy, do you have any further, any closing comments?
Mr. Chair, I've been overwhelmed with some of the expressions of the need for this project from my colleagues on the committee. And I understand what the committee members that said maybe it should be put on the shelf for a later time or a more opportune time. But one of the experiences that I had in September and October as chair of the bonding committee was to travel to all areas of the state and listen to the people talk about the need for the programs they were asking for or the projects they were asking for in their regions. And in 4 of the tours, on 4 of the tours in different regions of the state, someone sought me out to talk about the opportunity to get state money for a possible full-service community school district. They talked about the needs of especially bringing the county health people to the school district and work with the school district employees about the health of the children and the health of the families. They talked about coordination between county and regional social services and groups like the YWs and the YMCAs that were in their regions, where they all worked together to have a school district and community school that included the parents and the grandparents and all the school bus drivers and the community education programs, where somebody was trying to get them all to work together for the sake of the children, from the babies all the way through the senior citizens. And I didn't expect that on the bonding tours. I didn't expect that somebody would seek me out to talk about full service community schools, but it happened. And it happened in the smallest school districts where they were trying to not have to be forced into consolidation with the other school districts. They could see the road down, or the path down the road they were going, but they thought, the one superintendent talked to me and said, you know, if we could just keep our little area school. But in order to do that, we need to serve more than just the kids that are here. We have to serve their whole family. And so that's why I asked you, Chair Dabney, if we couldn't have another go at it. Because it was said to me more in the very rural areas, or where there had been some consolidation, but they still didn't have the total tie-in between the 4 school districts that they had met and consolidated with, or from the little community that just wanted to keep their own school. The voices were the same. The ask was the same. And they said, please keep working for full-service community schools. And that's what I'm doing. And I appreciate very much the time that you have given us to discuss this very important matter.
Representative Murphy, thank you for that. My apologies. Representative Creashaw, you've asked for recognition.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know sometimes with this setup, it's hard to get all that. Representative Murphy, I'll just let your comments stand. You're the bill author, and I think out of respect, I'll have a chance to talk about this maybe in Ways and Means. So I appreciate where you're going with this, and I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Representative Krisha. Seeing no further, MDE has responded, my apologies. And they say, we would monitor the grants much like we did in the last 2 rounds, at least 1 on-site visit per year, and then additional in-person site visits and coaching for sites when gaps in capacity are identified. Financial and interim report monitoring is also thorough and purposeful. We have strong working relationship with the grants finance division and work with our grants specialist when risks are identified in their accounting and staffing practices. For this round of grants, should they occur, staff has thought a lot about working with school partners to develop a deliverable at the end of the grant program, particularly with the planning grant. This would like a fully developed plan that could be subjected to a program evaluation that would give us data on the effectiveness of the implementation. That would be very beneficial for improvements to current programs and to those looking to start programs. And that's the end of the department's response to Representative Sandel's question. Seeing no further requests for recognition, the chair, Representative Murphy, would you like to renew your motion to refer House File 1031 to the Committee on Ways and Means?
I do.
Thank you very much. Ms. Sunderland, please take the roll.
Representative Dabney.
Aye.
Representative Sandsted.
Aye.
Representative Krisha.
Krisha votes no.
Representative Bennett.
No.
Representative Daniels.
Daniels votes no.
Representative Demuth.
No.
Representative Detmer.
Votes no.
Representative Edelson.
Aye.
Representative Erickson.
No.
Representative Hewitt.
Aye.
Representative Jurgens.
No.
Representative Katiza Watoon.
Aye.
Representative Kanesh Padin.
Aye.
Representative Marquardt.
Aye.
Representative Murphy.
Aye.
Representative Nornis.
No.
Representative Pryor.
Aye.
Representative Richardson.
Aye.
Representative Sandell.
Aye.
Representative Joachim.
Aye.
With 12 ayes and 8 nays, the motion prevails.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair.
Representative Sandsted?
I am sorry to interrupt. I think we need some clarification on the bill number. I believe you said 1031, and the full service community school, I believe, is 1013 for the record.
Thank you very much. I'll accept that correction and appreciate it.
Thank you.
Members, we have concluded our business for today. I'm working with committee staff and members to schedule probably 2 hearings next week, one for Tuesday and one for a yet to be determined other day next week. With that, anticipate being together a couple of times next week and hearing more bills as we move through the legislative session. With that, members, thank you all very much, and we stand adjourned.